Hello, everybody. We'll give it just another minute or two as folks look like they're still joining into the link here. So thanks everybody for your patience, and just hang tight for another minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. A couple more folks will be trickling into the session here, but we're really excited to talk to you about something new that we've launched here at YouGov, our team profiling tool. We look at this as being a very new offering to the market. There's a lot of data out there around teams, but we feel like ours is a little bit unique in that the way we're collecting the information, the way we're delivering the information, and the frequency of which we're delivering the information would be unique to YouGov. So my name is Scott Horowitz. I'm our Chief Revenue Officer for the Americas here at YouGov, and we're so excited to show this to you. We've got a lineup of panelists today. They're going to walk you through the data, the methodology, and really give you a peek behind the curtain as to how we have collected this information and how you can access it. So really quick, just a very high level background on who YouGov is for those that are not super familiar. I know we've got a lot of current clients and folks that we partner with on this webinar right now, but for those that aren't familiar, YouGov is essentially a data and analytics company that is collecting consumer opinion data every single day all over the world, over 40, 50 countries of daily consumer behavioral data, tracking brand health, tracking consumer sentiment across thousands of brands around the world. And one of the gaps that we found, at least here in the United States, is the gap of 13 to 17-year-olds. So as we all know who work in data in the US, 18 plus is kind of the standard. And that seems to be for legality purposes, obviously. We wanted to go a step further and really challenge ourselves based on a lot of client feedback. So our profiling tool, if you're not familiar with that, is an 18 plus tool with over 400,000 different variables listed inside there. So you can understand how any adults with kids, without kids, people that are grandparents, people that have brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, how they react to and respond to marketing, messaging, how they engage with brands, all of that. Obviously, our system is great for telling you how people think and feel towards brands in terms of everything from awareness down to consideration and purchase. And then our profiling tool goes a lot further than that into overall categorical behavior. So how much people are spending on different products and services and how they feel about those, as well as a whole bunch around influencers, celebrities, athletes, and so forth. And so what we've done based on client feedback about, I would say, just pre-COVID, like just at the front end of it, we had a workshop in our New York office with a bunch of our clients. And one of the questions that was brought up to the group was, what's missing, right? What's missing from your toolkit, whether it's something that we could create here at YouGov, or whether that be something that someone else should create, but really just more of an overarching holistic conversation of what does the industry need that we currently don't have. And there were two things that came up as common themes. One of them was a very robust, global connected dashboard of brand data from more than one country or region, which we're working on. So, sneak peek for that. And then teen data, 13 to 17-year-old data, even younger if you could, right? We'd love to see 6 plus or 8 plus. But let's start with what we know we can do, which is 13 to 17-year-old data. And that the other caveat to that was, we don't want to talk to the parents. We want to talk to the kids directly, right? Anyone could go get parents of teenagers, but how accurate is that information going to be? So it was quite the challenge, right? It wasn't a softball that we got laid up with to say, let's just go out and ask more parents of kids and create a separate data set for that. Let's go out and actually challenge ourselves and do 13 to 17-year-old research. And that's what we've done. And I'm super excited about this. Lance is going to show us what this looks like. We're going to talk about methodology, how we've gone out and collected this data, how the legalities have worked around it, and how you can be a part of it, right? Not just by subscribing to the actual profiling database itself, but what about custom needs that you may have? Because we all know that research leads to more research. So you're going to have a need that maybe this system is not going to cover off on yet. Doesn't mean the system won't cover off on it down the road. And it doesn't mean that we can't add to it, because as you know, for those that work with us currently, we're very flexible about adding, new variables, new topics, and new things into our profiling database. So this will be no exception. This will be the same thing. We'll be able to grow this over time. Sample will continue to grow over time. Variables will grow over time. And in the meantime, if you have custom needs around youth, just know this is a springboard to that, which is fantastic and super, super exciting. So Lance, I'm going to kick it over to you for a run through of what the system does, how it works, and how we can innovate together with our clients to create things based on demand for the marketplace. So Lance, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Lance Fraenkel, one of our heads of product. And today with Ella and Nicole, we're going to dive deep into some of the teen data. Ella and I are going to bust some myths. So try to make it a little more engaging rather than just spit some facts at you. We've got some commonly held myths that we're going to tackle through the first wave of our data and hopefully keep you interested. Then we'll do a little bit deeper dive into some fun facts that we pulled out. I'll do a live demo, and then Nicole will do a deep dive into some esports data. So we've got a nice tight agenda for you. But before we get into the actual insights, a little bit more background on the product. As Scott mentioned, this was a really special product for us, our first foray into surveying teens 13 to 17-year-old directly. Ella and our product innovation team had a lot of discussion with legal, with outside counsel, and I think the key takeaway for us is that we can reach this group if the questionnaire is age appropriate, and if we reach them where they are, right, and we serve them material that they consent to. So we have a sweepstake program, and we tested many different creative to retain teens, and we really landed on the message that your opinion matters, right? We did lots of like Instagram versus TikTok or influencer X versus Y, but really what resonated with this segment is that we want to hear your opinions and what you say matters. So that's really driven nice retention for us. We've collected about 2,500 completes on the survey. The survey is anywhere from 30 to 60 questions, depending on the teen's own experiences. There's different logic built into the survey. There's over 1,000 data points that you can slice and dice in our crunch system. And the idea is that it's not going to remain static, that we're going to be always on and updating the survey on a monthly cadence. So we definitely want to strike a balance between consistency so we can trend data over time, because we think that's going to be a really powerful capability, but also flexibility because we're in the field every month talking to teens, reaching them where they are. We're going to have the ability to go out and collect a library of insights over time, which we certainly have planned. So let's move to the next one, a little bit more about reaching them where they are. We have a nice chat program that we've innovated, and this is technology that YouGov owns to sort of survey within a messenger type program. So that's been a great way once we reach teens through our effective advertising on different social channels like Facebook and Instagram. We're able to get them into a chat environment, start to engage with them through some of these light touch points, and then get them into our deeper survey for our sweepstakes. We're giving away 10 iPads every quarter. So this is a little bit of just a screen capture into the life of how we're getting teens into our surveys and how we're keeping them engaged through our technology. Next one. A little bit deeper dive into what we're covering. Now you'll see this live in the platform itself and through some insights that we're pulling out. But this slide really does a good job of just summarizing all of the categories that we started with for our teen profiles launch. Demographics, there's a great media consumption section that gets into program level data, in addition to lots of good time spent variables. We've got about 15 attitudes that we started collecting. Our core product has over 700. So this is an area where we definitely want to continue expanding and building our library of attitudes with the direction of our beta clients. We've got a great sports and esports section. You'll hear a good amount on that from us and Nicole later, given the importance of that segment to this group. We've got an influencer section, and we're testing some open-ended feedback collection, which we make available to clients directly in the platform, and we have some plans to recode in future waves. And we're always growing, right? In terms of future plans, ambitions, brands that we're covering. These are all areas that we've collected feedback from an initial round of clients on what they thought would be most useful, and we've built the survey accordingly through these topic areas. All right. So moving to the next section, that gives you a good background on the product. Now, Ella and I are going to do some myth busting. I'm going to pass it to Ella to introduce herself and to kick us off.
Thanks, Lance. That's great. So hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today My name is Ella Pardoe and I work in the product innovation team based in London. So we are responsible for designing new and exciting data products that delight our customers. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard lots of generalizations and myths about teenagers. And one of the biggest surprises for me, reviewing the research and reviewing the data, is actually how many of these myths are wrong. So I'll invite you to kind of play along with us here, and we're going to bust some myths. So myth number one, teens don't watch TV. So how many of you have heard that one before? I'm sure it's quite a lot of you. So this decline in TV viewership has been attributed to many things, including the rise of streaming, the increased usage of smartphones, the rise in popularity for user-generated content on sites like TikTok. But now let's actually have a look at the data. So as Lance mentioned, we asked 2,500 young people aged 13 to 17 about their TV viewership habits. We found that an astonishing 80% of teens watch live TV. And the top 5 channels watched are the Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, and HBO. It proves you're never too old for cartoons, which is really good news for me as a kind of diehard Family Guy fan. But another key takeaway from this is that whilst there are undoubtedly advertising platforms which are on the rise, I wouldn't write live TV off just yet. We've still got teenagers watching live TV, a huge 80% of them. So myth number 2 is that teens rarely notice advertisements. So if anyone on the call today has teenagers, you might find yourself asking them to look up from their phone, pay more attention to their surroundings, or to watch where they're going. So there's a view that teenagers are often very consumed by a task or a device. And there's actually, interestingly, some science that backs this up. So inattentional blindness is the concept of sort of ignoring something that's in plain sight. And studies have shown that attentional capacity and awareness rates actually develop with age. So teenagers are much more likely to experience inattentional blindness. So we think that that's probably where this myth originates from, but it's probably also a hangover from when out-of-home advertising still kind of reigned king. So we asked teens which advertising medium would be most likely to grab their attention. And the top 3 advertising channels most likely to grab their attention were social media, video games, and online, so non-social media. And this is a really interesting set of answers and could really change the way we reach young people in the future. So a key takeaway is that young people are more likely to notice advertising when it features in an environment in which they're already engaged, be that scrolling on social media or gaming on Xbox or PlayStation. So to grab this audience's attention, we need to think like a young person and think creatively. What are they up to? Where can I find them? And how can I reach them? This leads us really nicely onto myth number 3. So teens just use social media to talk to their friends. Now, social media wasn't nearly as big when I was a teenager many moons ago, but I do distinctly remember my parents' disbelief when I would come home from school, having spent all day with my friends, and then spend all evening online chatting to them. And I remember my dad sort of incredulously asking, how can you possibly have that much to say to each other? Now, since then, social media has evolved and grown, but I still think there is this view that teens, the main usage for social media is to talk to their friends. Now, as part of our research, we were able to ask teenagers what it is exactly that they're doing on each of the social media sites which they use, which was really fascinating. And interestingly, the most popular reason for using social media was to watch funny videos. To dig into that data a little bit more, the top 5 platforms used to watch funny videos were YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook. So the key takeaway here is that young people are doing a lot more on social media than just chatting to their friends. They're consuming content, they're making plans, and they're learning new skills. So Lance, I'll hand over to you for myth number 4.
Cool. Thanks, Ella. Myth number 4, esports is a niche interest. I think esports has really burst onto the scene and is maturing, and Nicole will share some insights later on. But if we go to the actual insight from the data set, we'll see that nearly 70% of teens indicate they're at least a little bit interested in the concept of esports. Now, that's obviously wide-ranging. Esports is not like the NFL or the NBA and being a specific league. Esports is sort of a genre of leagues, right? A whole host of activity. It could even be considered mobile gaming, right? And there's so many ways to game these days, from casually on your phone through an app, or more hardcore in front of a computer or console. So esports really is broad, and I think the data really captures how big it is as a concept and as a sport, with 70% interested. And just for context, some of the top leagues that we're all used to being at the top of the list, the NFL, NBA, MLBs, are in that 50 to 60% range, or a little bit lower. So just to give you some of that context there. We have that extra stat on esports in gray about their top interest for teens. So this is sort of like an avid fan, a top box. So I think that's a little bit more comparable to some of the actual leagues themselves for reference. And then we've actually got the top teams covered. So we really go pretty deep in the esports data, as you'll see. And some of these teams, you know, I'm sure many of you seeing them for the first time. It just shows the diversity of ways there are to engage with this young audience, and really trying to open people's eyes about the opportunity that exists, both from an esport and gaming perspective, but also through engaging some of the more popular teams. Let's go to myth number 5. Teens today are less ambitious. I think that's a common trend in older generations, no matter what decade, where you think the generation before you is significantly lazier. In some instances, it may be the case. But when we look at the data itself, we'll actually see that a lot of the ambitions and things that teens want to do are very much old school, right? And very much resonate no matter what decade you're in. Maybe some of the top ones, like graduating high school and learning how to drive, and graduating college, but that idea of pursuit of knowledge and education, I think, is persistent, right, between younger and older generations. And certainly 4 and 5, learning a new skill, traveling the world, those are all things I think many of us can relate to. So teens and adults are different in many ways, but also similar in so many ways. And again, in terms of debunking myths, this was our last and final 5th myth that we wanted to bring you from the data set. Our next section goes into some key findings, and we'll keep this pretty brief because it'll connect nicely to the live demonstration of the data set itself. But we thought it was worth going beyond the myths and diving into some topics like social media and influencers. What you'll see here on the screen is that 66% of teens from our attitudinal statements agree that they often scroll aimlessly through social media, so huge amount of time spent. As you can see, 26% of teens are spending more than 5 hours a day on social media. So they're online, they're scrolling, they're there, they're waiting, they're consuming content and funny videos. And in terms of the platforms themselves, some of the things that stood out for me in the data is just YouTube's strength, right? You look at the YouTube brand and how much they dominate in terms of being that video streaming platform that younger and older teens really just don't live without, right? Something like 90% usage rate amongst the segment, which is clear in a way, number 1, but Instagram, TikTok, definitely close by at 2 and 3, with Snapchat and Facebook in that top 5 set, with lots of user engagement as well. I'll pass it to Ella to do our next 2 before the live demo.
Thanks, Lance. So on this slide, you'll see the headline, "Influencers are here to stay." So 65% of teens follow an influencer. And interestingly, gaming influencers are the most popular genre, leading the way with 38%, closely followed by music influencers, who are on 37%. We then asked teenagers specifically which influencers did they follow. And some of the top influencers include BTS, Harry Styles and other members of the band One Direction, PewDiePie, the YouTuber and comedian, James Charles, the beauty YouTuber and makeup artist, and Addison Rae, the social media personality and dancer. So if any of those names I just mentioned there aren't familiar to you, and I will admit there were definitely a couple I had to Google, it might be worth doing some research on them, just given how much time young people today are spending consuming their videos. We also did some research into the brands that teenagers like. So Doritos came out as the tastiest snack, and then we examined the data for people who had chosen Doritos as their favorite snack. And we noticed that they're statistically more likely to follow gaming influencers. The tastiest fast food came out as Chick-fil-A. And again, diving into the data, we found that Chick-fil-A fans were more likely to follow the NFL. And finally, Nike came out as the coolest clothes and shoes brand. A quick look at this audience showed us that Nike fans are more likely to watch ESPN and Adult Swim. So key takeaways just from that section is that we should avoid stereotypes and generalizations, and where possible, speak to young people or use data collected directly from young people. And one size very much doesn't fit all. So a campaign you might have designed for an adult audience will need to be kind of completely rethought for a younger audience. So I will now hand over to Lance for a live demo.
All right, great news. Let's look at some live data together. Let's dive into the interface. And then we'll come back to Nicole for a deep dive into esports. So here we are. We're live in teen profiles. For those of you who are already YouGov clients using profiles today, you'll notice it looks pretty much identical, right? It lives in the same system using our Crunch platform that houses all the data. The data set, some big differences between core profiles and teen profiles. One, obviously questions. We're trying to stay consistent where it's applicable. However, we do have to make sure the data is age appropriate, and we want to keep the survey fun and engaging. So there are some differences as it relates to that. Certainly as it relates to weighting, we're weighting this segment to make sure it's nationally representative on several key demographic characteristics. And we're updating on a monthly cadence. So while profiles updates weekly, it just sort of keeps adding on itself. And we're going to do that here as well, but we're also going to have the ability to trend over time. For the first couple months, probably won't be a heavily used feature, but as we build a bigger data set with more months of history, that's certainly something we'll look to work with our clients on showcasing that ability. Now, in the data set itself, you've got your data tree down the left, which you can interact with. We've got your core demographics listed with region and state available. Certainly would like to get lower into DMA and as we build that sample up. We have our attitudinal section where we have our statements agreed with. And in the center of the screen, just like core profiles mode, this is where you build out your segments of the population and can save them individually or at a company level. So you'll see a bunch of filters that I was previously working on, things from sports fan bases to health and fitness interests to Nike rated the coolest brand, YouTube regular users. So these are all things that I've been in the data set working with. I'll just start with a basic age comparison, you know, the younger teen segment, 13 to 14 versus the older teen segment, 16 to 17. And then it's simply drag and drop, right? If I wanted to drag the attitudes over into the center, pretty much instantly, you'll see a list of highest to lowest or by biggest differentiator of how the 13 to 14 group compares in this scenario to the 16 to 17 segment. And you'll notice the first insight's actually a little bit interesting as it relates to gender fluidity. With the younger segment, 57% agree that there are more than two genders, which is up from 51.1% in the older teens. So you can see that's certainly a lifestyle that's gaining more and more relevance and acceptance as you get younger with the teen audience. So these are the attitudes we currently cover off, and similarly down the data tree, we can drop all the brands we cover off into the center and analyze them as well. So that's another area of the data set we're really looking to expand on in future releases. We've got a core set of maybe 60, 70 companies that we started with. We're able to, again, sort by highest to lowest and then clearly see that stat from earlier that Ella highlighted, that Nike Chick-fil-A are two of the top brands in the survey as it relates to coolest brands or tastiest foods with the 13 to 14 and 16 to 17 segment. You'll notice that insight here too, where Nike's actually maybe losing some steam, right? 34% of older teens versus 30% of younger teens. That's near that statistically significant level indicated by the Z-score, and you can see the under-indexing for the younger segment. So definitely something for Nike to be mindful of, albeit they still have the top spot by a pretty wide margin, so still in a leadership area. So that gives you a little bit in our attitudes and brands. We do have a nice ambition section, and I'll highlight some of the open-ended data, which I think is unique to this data set as well. Of course, the majority of the data is closed-ended, survey-based, but we are allowing some free-form text. We're obviously QCing it. Right now, we're making it available in verbatim form, and as we build up more sample, we're going to do some smart recoding into buckets for our clients. But we think this is a really valuable, dense set of information, and we have it in a few places related to ambitions, another related to influencers, where we have influencers followed listed in free text, and another related to favorite TV show in our media consumption area. And the media consumption area is one of my favorite areas of the data set. I just think it's rich with insights in terms of how to reach teens and where they're spending their time, both online and offline. So again, just a really strong data set with hopefully good applicability, whether you're a brand or an agency or anything in between, or just care about teen insights moving forward. The last section I'll highlight beyond media consumption and social media is the sports section, which will be a nice transition to Nicole shortly. We have a really nice, solid core group of sports data that is identical to what we cover in our adult profiles data set. So we'll have global and local leagues that we're collecting a level of interest scale on, and we'll also have a full set of associated teams that we're tracking. So when it comes to sponsorship activation or who's the best fit, whether it be a league or a team, we're gonna have all that data out of the box, ready to go for you to analyze amongst your key segment of teens.
And Lance, while we're on the topic of sports, we did have a question coming around the influencers that we're tracking. What about athletes?
Yeah, so right now I think the influencer only is where the athlete would shine through, but we're open to expansion, right? Right now we have the leagues and we have the teams. If we should go that next layer beyond influencers and start to track athletes of the major sports teams, I think we're open to it. It's always a balance of survey length with this group because we want to keep them coming back, and we know that they have short attention spans, but I think that's part of the evolution of the product, is hearing from our clients where they want us to go, and we'll be addressing those updates on a monthly cadence moving forward.
There have definitely been some open-ended athlete mentions, and the influencers followed. I know, just poking around, Steph Curry, LeBron, like definitely a handful coming out. So as some continue to rise, they'll surface as well.
Cool. All right, well, let's go back into the presentation. I'll stop my share. And I believe, Ella, if you pick it back up, I think we're on to Nicole's section.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Lance. And thanks, everyone, for spending a little bit of your Monday with us. My name is Nicole Pike. I'm based here in the US, like most of the rest of the folks on the phone, and I lead our global esports and gaming sector here at YouGov. So my role is really to not only support all of our clients that are active and sit directly in the esports and gaming space, but also to look at all of our products and our offerings that YouGov has holistically, and ensure that we're accurately and fully covering data as it relates to gaming and esports. I'm sure there are several brands, marketers, agencies on the line here who are taking a close look at gaming and trying to keep up with trends and understand how to reach consumers via this area. And so my role is to ensure that we have the data that you need and everything we do to be able to do that. And of course, when we started to build out teen profiles, definitely no exception here. My voice was loud in terms of making sure that we had a lot of gaming specific data in the data set. And really the results bore out exactly why that was so important. So I guess, first of all, why are we even featuring gaming in a general webinar about our product? All the different questions we asked and a lot of the comparative context data that we have within our teen profile system was very clear in showing just how important gaming is to teens for a myriad of different reasons. And we'll walk through some different interaction points here. So yeah, the reason we're talking about gaming right now is because of some of these large stats that just show how important it is to this audience. First of all, 86% of teens are gamers in some way, shape, or form, whether that's on a mobile phone, console, PC, handheld device. So near ubiquitous in terms of an activity that teens participate in. Probably not all that surprising when we consider that pretty much every teen has a gaming device in their pocket, a mobile phone. This was alluded to earlier, but I think just worth calling out again, just to emphasize the importance and resonance of gaming. Gaming influencers are the most followed influencer type among teens. And that's not just among teen males, that's teens as a whole, male plus females. So really just shows how wide of a reach and how widely entertaining gaming is to a broad swath of the 13 to 17-year-old set. Also, when we talk about gaming, Lance mentioned esports earlier, and we'll talk about some stats around that. There's actual playing of games, but another huge trend is people watching other people play video games and watching live streamed content of one person playing a video game against themselves, against others, and the interactivity that comes along with that. And this has grown tremendously. Sites like Twitch, YouTube, and others have tons of live gaming content. In the past 6 months, 76% of teens have engaged with this type of game streaming content on a gaming specific stream platform in some way, shape, or form. So again, just really, really high penetration of that activity among the US teen audience. Next slide. Now, I mentioned, the universality of some of those larger stats, but when we look into male teens in particular, we start to see just how, not only how far-reaching gaming is, but how much time and energy they're spending with gaming content in some way, shape, or form. So the average male teen is spending at least 12 hours a week gaming. That, of course, fits in with all of their other extracurriculars and homework and sleep and school, whatever else they're doing. So really, really high just overall engagement in terms of a hobby that they enjoy. For those who don't know, Discord is a gaming application where essentially you can talk to others, generally via voice chat. And really started out as a way for players to speak to each other while they were playing video games. It's now expanding a bit and kind of reaching out into some other areas as well, but in particular remains really core focused on kind of that audio ability to communicate within gaming. 41% of male teens use Discord, which may not sound substantial, but when you compare that to things like, the major social media platforms that have been around forever, Facebook, Twitter, even Reddit, which is obviously relatively popular among teens, you can just see how omnipresent Discord is and how important it is to this particular age group. So 41% versus 38% on Facebook, for example. Another kind of cross entertainment comparison that I thought was really interesting, and actually checked the data a couple times myself if that tells you anything. So 50% of male teens have played Minecraft in the past 6 months. For those who don't know Minecraft, it's a game that is now across multiple platforms, but it's essentially kind of building and creating, very popular among teens and even younger kids, kind of like that 8 to 12 sect. But so 1 in 2 male teens have played Minecraft in the past 6 months. If you compare that to usage rates of TikTok, obviously very popular among teens, 51%. 45% watch Disney Plus, 34% watch Nickelodeon. So again, thinking about a single video game reaching as many or more teen males than some of these, really popular, major established brand type entertainment forms, just really shows the power and strength of gaming among this audience. Next slide. Okay. Last slide here before we move over into some Q&A. I know there's been a few that have popped up in the chat. Feel free to, as I'm on this last slide, type some other questions in so that we're ready for you after that. So I thought this was really interesting and important to point out. You know, Lance mentioned that with our core profiles product among ages 18 plus, we've tried as much as possible in our teen tool to replicate the questions that we ask to ensure that we have the ability to compare. And so a number of gaming questions that we have actually align really directly with adults in our core profiles tool. And I think it's really important because some of the differentiation that we see as I look through the data speaks to why it's important to listen to teens. And if you're a marketer that's looking to reach Gen Z, for example, to really think about teens separately, or at least understand kind of that younger part of that generation versus the older, because there are some really clear differences. So what I've done is just pulled together a few stats comparing teens 13 to 17 versus 18 to 34-year-olds from our core profiles product. So for example, 25% of teens game on a Nintendo Switch versus only 16% of 18 to 34-year-olds. When we look at, you know, what type of content, what type of IP do you look at to reach teens versus adults or young adults? Important to know which platforms they're actually more likely to be playing on. Another interesting stat was the fighting game genre. So about 1 in 3 teens play fighting games on a PC or console. One of the most popular being Smash Brothers, which coincidentally is a Nintendo Switch game. So kind of a connection between those first two stats there. But only 16% of 18 to 34-year-olds play that genre. So if we're looking at, you know, what's the next trend, what next genre should we be looking at to grow over time to, you know, maybe become the next big esports genre, we can see that fighting is one that really seems to have more of a stronghold among teens and is starting to grow among that younger audience. And then finally, looking at some of the esports specific questions we have. So Lance showed a bit of data we had earlier on which esports teens follow. We also look at which esports leagues and events teens engage with. So about just over 30% of US teen esports fans have watched Call of Duty League, so Activision Blizzard's latest major league, mostly US-based teams, though a handful international as well, obviously centered around the extremely popular Call of Duty game. So 31% versus only 11% of 18 to 34-year-old esports fans. So again, just kind of looking at, okay, what are the things that are up and coming as we look at teens moving into having more purchase power over time and that impacting how other trends evolve among the 18 plus audience, taking a peek at some of this data among teens and then comparing it to their adult counterparts can be really valuable. All right, with that, I will pause and toss it back to Scott, who I think is going to start throwing out some of these questions and collectively we'll answer them.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Nicole. And awesome, great to see this in action and to learn about it, how it's been kind of collected and curated and what it will look like as it grows. So one of the questions we got was around cutting data. So the ability to cut and slice data, maybe 13 to 14-year-olds versus 15 to 17-year-olds. So Lance, I know you showed a little bit of that during your presentation. Obviously very easy to do and something that's right in our wheelhouse in terms of any variable in the system can become a target group or a control group. So that's exactly a great thing. Yep. And then there's other questions in here as well around, I think, things that would be considered custom, right? So if we all know syndicated data, it's got a little bit of something for everyone, but it's not going to be everything to anyone. So one question we had, and this might be for Ella and for Lance, is how do we get more data in the system to uncover why some ads appeal to teens more than others, right? And to that point, right, like we talked about recommendations and where people are getting information from. What about recommendations from fellow teens or from influencers? Is there going to be anything in the system around that?
I'll just start by saying there's a few data points around uncovering why some ads appeal to teens more than others. We have the sort of advertising channels that grab your attention. So we have a question on that. And then we have 3 or 4 current attitudinal statements around personalization, around entertainment level of ads and what are teen expectations. So I do think that there are a few data points already collected that can help triangulate what's going to make an effective ad depending on the segment of the teen that you queue up. But as Scott said, there's always room for more. We have dozens of attitudes on advertising alone in our core profile segment. So I think it's a matter of working with our clients and seeing if there are questions or attitude statements that we can tee up that they think are going to be valuable for those why answers. And then to Scott, your point, like where we can't go deep enough with syndication, we have the tools in-house to quickly reach teens, whether it be through a short, 30-second, 5-minute survey or a longer tracking study. We have methodologies that are effective at doing both. Ella, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think, that's a really good summary, Lance. I think the only other data point that I would mention is we have one around which of the following topics, and we give a really extensive list of topics, would you be most likely to click on if it appeared in your newsfeed? So using that data combined with all of the other data that we've got around things like ad personalization and all the ones Lance mentioned, I think you can kind of build a really, really accurate picture of which adverts are likely to kind of land with this audience.
Yep, perfect. One question also was whether or not the deck and all of this will be available afterwards for download. Yes, we'll make sure we get everybody the slides as well. So you've got that. So that's fantastic. What about, Nicole, maybe this one's going to go over to you. We had a question about esports brands and how they've taken on such popularity so quickly among male teams versus traditional sports. And maybe to follow up on that, what kind of advice would you provide to a traditional sports brand if they were entering the space and kind of seeing the uptick in esports? And we're seeing that through this data, right? If we didn't have esports and gaming data in a youth and teen profiling tool, then it would be a massive, massive miss. So talk a little bit about why this has taken up so quickly and what other kind of traditional sports brands could do.
Yeah, definitely. I guess first, as a quick preface to that, I'd say that this is really one of the strengths of this tool overall, is that we are looking at all different forms of entertainment among teens, all in one data set, which is something that's pretty unique. I know, especially in the gaming side of things, usually there's kind of like a gaming study or a gaming survey, and it only has questions about that area. But what this allows you to do is, what Teen Profiles allows you to do is to make those exact kind of comparisons and see how teens are trading off and spending time. And I think the cool thing that we can dig into further are things like, how do they engage with different types of content to help answer your question. I think one of the key things that I've found is that the esports organizations that are most popular among teens are not just organizations that are competing in events. They have content houses. They are leaning just as much into non-gaming content or lifestyle related content as they are, hardcore. We play this particular video game, and and anyone that follows us is really, interested in watching how we play and what we do and how we compete. Sure, that's the case, but they have, much broader and more generic topics that they're engaging with their fan base on, which I think is just, exactly the way that we see teens consuming all forms of content. It's digital, it's quick, it's, not watching 3-hour long, games on weekends kind of thing. They're looking for that highlight reels type of view. And I think that these organizations do a great job of really bringing not only the type of content, but also the form of content to teens and the way that they like it. In terms of a traditional sport org and advice, certainly it depends on the org. Some have gone ahead and invested in esports as a way to kind of diversify a bit. Others are kind of taking let's look at that why, right? That content piece, and how do we leverage our athletes and our brand as more of a lifestyle brand and influencer type brand, and try to connect with teens in that way, as opposed to relying on them to attend events and view matches. So lots of opportunity there. And of course, you can reach out to us if you want to chat on it more. Oh, Scott, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Health and fitness is obviously a big topic coming out of COVID, right? How people are going to get back into being active and what they're going to do with their spare time, and how they're staying healthy. Lance, anything on the roadmap around, obviously we've got a little bit in participation. We've got obviously a lot on what people are following, but just general activity overall, right? Thoughts on how we can add to the system and where that would appropriately go to help kind of check that box for folks who need to have more information on teens and fitness and activity.
I think it's a great area for expansion. I think right now we have the participation angle, as you mentioned, Scott. So I think that's the low-hanging data point that I would point to first, is that we can look at participation and potentially trend that over time, since we're going to be collecting that over the long term. So that'd be my go-to starting point. But for health and fitness in general, I think that's a clear area of expansion where we can look to add questions on that section and maybe rotate some other questions out.
Yep. And maybe to that point too, Lance, can you maybe talk a little bit about how we'll get more, and I don't know if this is maybe an Ella question as well, how we'll get more into the system over time, right? We're getting a lot of recommendations from clients on topics and variables and everything that we need to cover off on. How do we get that into the system, and how quickly can we react when a client comes in with a request?
Yeah, I think there's two different ways to think about it. One is adding to the syndicated data set to benefit all clients. And every month we're going to be reviewing a list of client feedback and prospect feedback. So we already have our first month of feedback from our initial wave of introductory clients. We've got 5 or 6 items that we're actioning on for the August wave, which is going into the field next week. And the same thing's going to happen every single month moving forward. So I think that we're open for client suggestions, and we think that's just natural evolution of the product, is going to be expanding into different topic areas and building our library of brands and attitudes that we're covering off. The second route would be custom, right? If you need an answer today or tomorrow or next week, right, on a short survey or a longer tracker, we can use the chat tools that we showed you earlier and our expertise at reaching the teen audience, and we can get your survey filled quickly, separate from the syndicated environment. So I'd say there's those two routes are, we're completely open-minded, and we're going to point our clients in the right direction when they come to us about what we can syndicate and what might be custom to them. Ella, anything you want to expand? Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, maybe to that point, we could talk a little bit about the custom capability that we have now to reach teams, right? So for the things that are not covered off in this, or the ability to add something or draft off of this, Ella, do you want to maybe touch on how can our clients get information on 13 to 17-year-olds, or sometimes even younger, right? 6+, I've seen studies that we've done recently. What's the best way for somebody to start to collect information like that in a custom environment with YouGov?
Yeah, that's a great question, Scott. I think Nicole can probably talk to a recent example we've done for one of our clients. But we, as Lance mentioned, we can use YouGov Chat, which is our platform agnostic chatbot technology. We can launch targeted adverts on social media, so Facebook, Instagram, and lots of other sites. And we've got kind of a proven track record of targeting this audience, and we can kind of help create the questions that are going to land with impact. So we've, like Lance mentioned, we've got the kind of capability there, and we can lend our expertise to get you the answers that you're looking for.
Perfect.
I saw a question on awareness. Can we look at brands by awareness? And I'll just really quickly touch on that one. We started with a more of like a preference metric, just from our internal conversations with our experts and talking to clients. That seemed to be just a stronger metric to go with, like sort of a coolest brand, tastiest snack, or fast food company. So we're open-minded. I think awareness to me typically has been less interesting, especially for established big brands. Awareness only goes so far, but preference is really where we begun. But not to say we can't expand into upper funnel metrics or more metrics in the future, but I think our starting point has been that preference angle.
And Lance, I'd just add there, depending on, I'm not sure if it's a current client or not who asked the question, but we do have a teen brand index offering. So our brand tracking product, we do have that in the US among 13 to 17-year-olds, where we get into 16 different KPIs, all the way from awareness down to likelihood to recommend and repurchase. So if someone's looking for more depth across those metrics, that's certainly an option as well.
Yep. And I think that the thing to remember, right, and the thing to think about when looking at this product and the way that the YouGov products have evolved over time is that this will be an evolving tool, right? This will be a tool that will take shape based on client feedback and based on what the market wants and needs to be able to answer questions. I think when I boil down what it is that YouGov actually does is we help people answer questions to make business decisions. And those business decisions come in many different shapes and forms. And if we need to go in a slightly different route on some of the questions that we ask or some of the variables that we need to cover as the world changes, right? If you think about what our 18 plus profiling tool looked like 2 or 3 years ago, there was nothing in there on cryptocurrency. There was nothing in there on cannabis. There was nothing in there on all of these things that are going on now. And our ability to react and respond in a very timely manner is important, right? And there's a question in the chat about gender, right? It's a very sensitive topic these days. If 60% of the teens say that there's more than 2 genders in this day and age, what's the whole point of boys and girls, right? So we may see some modification and some changes to our gender questions, not just in our teen profiling, but in our 18 plus system as well. And we're trying to take some of those learnings from the 18 plus profiling and bring that down to the 13 to 17-year-olds and vice versa. So there'll be a lot of added content, added variables into the system as the world changes and as the world evolves. So just stay tuned on that one. But again, remember the folks that are subscribing to this are the ones that get to really help push and guide that roadmap moving forward, because this was born out of a discussion with current clients who are subscribing to the 18 plus tool and said, I'd really love to have more. And that's how I think a lot of our tools have come to be the way they are, right? Our sports index tracking tool, our destination index tracking tool, our gambling and sports betting dashboard that we have globally have all come out of client discussions with our account management team and our client servicing team and with our sector heads like Nicole and others who are in the market talking to you about what needs you have and what else we can do to help. So obviously stay tuned for more on that. Want to make sure that we leave everybody with a few minutes of their day left. So we'll follow up with any of the additional questions that have been asked that we can answer for you individually. There were some very specific ones in there. We'll make sure that we make this presentation available to everybody who attended so that you can send this around. And if you would like a demonstration of the teen profiling tool, want to get some more information, just contact anybody that you work with at YouGov, and everybody can point you in the right direction. And the odds are you'll have a really good demonstration with Lance in the next week or two that he can show you exactly what's in the system and where we're headed from here. So thank you again, everybody, for joining. We'll make this presentation available, and we look forward to sharing this with you as this continues to grow and evolve over time. And if you have any ideas for new products and new things that we can measure, by all means, Ella's shaking her head here because she's on that team. So raise your hand and let us know if there's anything else that we can do to help gap fill the market where there may be a need right now you're not currently being serviced. Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
we appreciate the time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.